Okay, back on the record. Mr. Trevino, do you have another witness?
Yes, sir. Chief Lane.
Okay. How you doing, Chief? Pretty good. I already swore you under. Please give your name and your position for the record.
My name is Keith Lane. I'm the Chief of Police here in New Braunfels.
Go ahead.
May I proceed? Thank you.
Yeah.
Chief Lane, how long have you been the Chief of Police for the city of New Braunfels?
3 years and 11 months.
Okay. And can you please give us a brief rundown of your history in law enforcement?
Yes, sir. So I started in law enforcement in 1987. Started working for the city of Keller. I worked there for 22 years in different capacities, corporal, FTO, sergeant. I did some specialized units and that type of thing. In 2007, I was promoted to commander of the Criminal Investigations Division. 2009, I was offered the police chief job in Haltom City, Texas. I was police chief there for about 6 years and 8 months. Then they made me director of public safety. Then they asked me to be the interim city manager, and then they asked me to be the permanent city manager. So for about 4 years, I was the city manager there. I retired in January of 2020. And then October of 2020, I was asked to be the interim chief here in New Braunfels.
How many officers do you supervise?
We were authorized 164 officers and 40 civilians.
Can you tell us the structure of and inform the court if a person has, an officer has a complaint filed against them, if you could describe the process that it goes through before it gets to your desk?
Well, it depends on how the complaint comes in, right? We have internal complaints, we have external complaints, and then we have complaints that are actually both. Like, we'll have an internal complaint, like this case, for example, when Sergeant Scott initiated, but we also have some that are initiated by the first line supervisor, and there's also an external complaint that comes on top of that. So the procedure is there's some summary information collecting, right, at the summary level. The first line supervisors are going to call the complainant back. If it's external, they're going to gather some information so that they can figure out whether they're going to handle it on the summary level or it's actually going to be pushed up towards me in an internal affairs investigation. So that's how they come in.
And you mentioned briefly that this particular case that we're here on today, the incident of September 6, 2023, was an internal complaint?
Yes, sir.
And how is that authorized as far as telling internal affairs that a formal investigation needs to be conducted?
It's basically recommendations that go up the chain from the summary level. It could be, I believe Sergeant Scott testified today that he talked to Lieutenant Robles first and then his captain, who's Captain Pinshorn. Basically, the assistant chief at the time, Chief Vargas, he was the one who initiated the complaint. I think there's been some confusion on what the complaint is and what the law requires.
What did Assistant Chief Vargas, what was his process in the complaint?
So basically, he takes the information that's collected at the summary level, right? And so what the complaint has to contain is it has to contain the potential policy violations, right, that come out of the initial information gathering process. It also has to state kind of a synopsis of what the accusations are that started the complaint. So that's what that is.
And once Assistant Chief Vargas starts that process, then will the process go to internal affairs?
Yes, sir.
That's when Lieutenant Bell then takes over?
Yes, sir. At the time, it was Lieutenant Bell, yes, sir.
And when Lieutenant Bell completes his investigation, he makes certain findings that are, in his opinion, if they're either sustained, inconclusive, or unfounded.
Yes, sir. I would say he provides a combination of the facts. He also gives his opinions and observations of things that happened during the investigation. So it's a combination of, obviously, the whole idea of a disciplinary process in my mind is to get to objective reasonableness, right? That's what I'm looking for. There's a lot of subjectivity that comes into it, and what I'm looking for as a chief is when I do the final review of it, I want to know the facts. I want to know objectively what happened. And of course, there's a follow-up, there's a pre-disciplinary hearing with the officer, and usually their attorney's present at that too. But that's kind of the process for me. That's what I'm trying to get to, is make it as objective as possible. The number 1 and 2 complaints in law enforcement about discipline is, for one, it's too subjective. The other one, it takes too long, right? I don't want to be arbitrary and capricious, I believe is how Mr. Dunbar described it. Quite the opposite. We want to be objective.
In this process, who is the sole person responsible for determining whether or not an officer the charges would be unfounded, or if they're given an indefinite suspension, or if they're given days off, or whatever type of discipline?
The ultimate decision maker is me, the chief of police.
So that's
pre-appeal. I don't want to disrespect this process, but pre-appeal, the final decision maker is me.
Internal Affairs doesn't have any role in that.
No, sir. Basically, once I get an investigation, I will typically have follow-up questions, no matter what the investigation is. I'll also get input from my command staff, the first line supervisors, that type of thing. So it's not once the investigation comes to me, it's not necessarily over. The information collecting is not necessarily complete.
Can you put Exhibit 1 on the screen, please? And go down to page 22. What is this section called, aggravating circumstances? What does that entail?
So this section is for disciplinary decision making, right? It's one of the objective things I use to decide, okay, what exactly is what's the appropriate level of discipline? So as you can see, what it kind of determines is the history of complaints. And I know Mr. Dunbar asked earlier, why did we arbitrarily pick February 16th of 21? What I did was I asked Lieutenant Bell to go all the way back during my tenure. I don't really, chiefs make decisions in different ways and for different reasons, right? So I don't want to include any adverse discipline that may have happened before I got here. So that's the reason for that time frame. But it's basically a list, and it in accordance with progressive discipline, you'll see a lot of entries there on there that say unfounded, because our guardian tracking system also, that's one of the things we want to catch too, right? Not only or what the officers are doing wrong, but when it's unfounded, we also capture commendations. So that's kind of what that is. The aggravating circumstances kind of sets out what the progressive discipline was leading up to this.
Now, of all these bullet points that we have on this exhibit, the last one is 9/14/23. That's the one that was pending, that is the basis of why we're here today, correct?
Yes, sir.
So before this case, there were 12 other instances under at least your commandership where you were reviewing the job performance of Officer Akers.
Correct.
I'd like to turn your attention, because some of them, as you just mentioned, were unfounded, and some led to a 30-hour suspension, which is part of Exhibit 7, but we'll just stick to this exhibit right now. If you can recall what the 11/4/21 incident was that led to a 30-hour suspension.
Yes, sir. So Officer Akers had gone to basically a mental health call, right? A mental health crisis call. It was a husband and wife. The wife had called in on the husband, as I recall. We ended up doing an emergency detention on him based on him meeting the criteria for one. After the officer left to transport him, Officer Akers was still there. In his interaction with the wife, she mentioned to him that her husband had some weapons in the house, and she wanted to get those. She just wanted to get rid of those weapons, right? I think out of memory, I believe he gave her kind of a couple of options. One is you can take them to a pawn shop. Otherwise, I know somebody who might be interested in them. That person that was interested in him happened to be ultimately turned out to be his father-in-law. And so he kind of brokered a purchase between his father-in-law and the female that was on scene to basically purchase those weapons. And the purchase was made. We found that.
Was there a complaint made?
Well, yes, sir. When the husband returned after he was released from his emergency detention, yes, he made a complaint to the department. I'm sure it went to the summary level. Probably a sergeant took it. But yes, he made the complaint saying my weapons are gone. She's telling me that the officer brokered a sale between her and his father-in-law, and he wanted his weapons back.
And that's what led to the 30-hour suspension?
Yes, sir.
Lacking of professionalism. That's not what you would expect an officer under your shift to do, would you?
No, absolutely not. That's unethical. It's improper. That's a horrible decision to make to get involved to that degree.
The very first incident that you're involved in with Officer Akers was one that occurred on February 16th of 2021. Do you recall that one where there was a discourtesy incident?
Oh, off the top of my head, no, sir.
But it did result in a written reprimand?
Yeah, yes, sir. And sometimes if they're really stuck on whether or not to push it up from the summary level to me, sometimes they'll just say, Chief, what do you think about this? That was probably one of those things where, based on the circumstances, I was like, I think it would be appropriate to issue a written reprimand. If it says at my request, that's typically what happened.
And then we had the incident of 7/26/21, which is part of Exhibit 8, but we'll just stay with this since it's your conclusions, that also had to do with Miss Trevino. And that was where we had seen some video previously where she's at a storage facility and she and Officer Akers have an encounter. Do you recall that incident?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. What did you find disturbing about that encounter?
I found a lot of things disturbing. When I first watched the video, tactically speaking, it was horrible. I thought the officer, based on what the call was and what the scene looked like when he got there, put himself in danger.
You're talking about Officer Akers?
Yes, sir, which of course concerned me. I know as I went through the video, I believe Lieutenant Bell and I can't remember who else was there, but essentially I hadn't been here that long. But basically my first question was, is this actually how we're training officers to respond to calls? And I think they were equally, I use the word mortified, right, about the scene. I know we've watched it a couple times and going back through it. I mean, it's tactically, it's not acceptable at all.
What criticism do you have specifically of Officer Akers as he engaged with Ms. Trevino? Sure.
So a lot's been said about the time of night, the fact that it was closed. I believe there was somebody that called in and said it was a possible burglary. He didn't have a backup unit on scene. I think you hear him on his body-worn camera when he starts to physically engage with Ms. Trevino. He actually calls for a second at that point. Approaching it, the car, he was at a disadvantage because the headlights of the car were on, right? The door was open, but you couldn't see. You know, it's very difficult to see what's going on behind those headlights. So instead of driving up right next to the car, if you saw there was a cut in the building, right? So if he pulled over to the left, he could have got out of his vehicle, had his vehicle cover on the right, and had that wall cover on the left and wait for backup. So you saw some of the things that he got himself into. When he approached her, there's no way he could have seen if anyone was behind the car, in the car. And then you'll notice as he engages with her, there's a vehicle that pulls up behind the scene, right? And I think at that point, I don't think he'd called the second yet, or maybe he had just called it. So tactically, you know, we're taught. I've been doing this for a long time, and you're taught from the very beginning. You don't push a disadvantage, right? You create an advantage for yourself. So that was a long discussion between me and the command staff. Actually, it actually expanded out to both patrol lieutenants and and I asked them, I said, you know, based on, what are you guys recommending? What do you think? And of course it came out, you know, like, we think a written reprimand is appropriate with some follow-up training and tactics and de-escalation and legally justified and all that kind of stuff. So, again, I deferred to the command staff on that, and I said, okay, but this is unacceptable tactics for anybody.
What, if anything, did de-escalation have to do, or that it should have been done or utilized with regard to that?
Well, yeah, so he forced himself into a situation where, you know, he started walking towards the vehicle, she followed, she shut the door, everything natural that somebody that's doing something wrong is going to do, right? So his response was good. Once he engaged with her, it was kind of like a yelling match back and forth, right? So before your backup gets there and you're in a spot like that, yeah, retreat, de-escalate if you have to tactically. What ended up happening that nobody's talked about before, one of the basically what the written reprimand was for is that I believe Sergeant Scott and Lieutenant Bell both touched on it maybe, is it wasn't for excessive use of force. It was actually for inadequate use of force, because when you start to use force, you're supposed to complete it in the manner that you've been trained. And what happened was he actually handcuffed Miss Trevino, and it created a situation where the handcuffs were around his microphone cord. So if you saw how close he was and he didn't disengage, that was one of the reasons. It's hard to see in the video, and so I asked the investigators at the time. I was like, what is going on here? He's close and he can't disengage. I believe that was one of Miss Trevino's biggest complaints too. Is like, well, he was on me and he wouldn't disengage from me. And I believe Lieutenant Bell actually explained to her, well, you know, he handcuffed you, but the radio cord, microphone cord was entangled in that handcuffing. So it's kind of like creating, you know, if you're going to use force, it's required on us to use the least amount necessary, right? But it's also incumbent upon us to do it correctly.
And as far as the type of training, how did you determine what type of training you needed to have?
It was a group discussion between the command staff members and me, because I was not satisfied. I was not ready to just say, okay, here's your written reprimand, go back on the street. You know, I wanted to make sure that he was given the appropriate training for the deficiencies on that particular call.
And is it somewhat unusual to have the lieutenant go with the officer who's being reprimanded and make sure they actually go to the courts?
Yes. And when you know, that was not a requirement of mine, but I think Lieutenant Bell felt like, hey, he knew I was serious. He knew that I was disturbed by the call and how it was handled, right? I just wanted to make sure that department-wide, that's not what we were training our officers to do, that we were training our officers to not put themselves in danger, right? I'm saying that for Pat's sake too. You know, I don't want to see any officer put themselves in a situation where they get hurt because they don't have a backup or they use the incorrect tactics, right? And you don't want, we're arresting somebody, like he was putting Miss Trevino in custody, but we don't want her to get injured either. And so if you do it incorrectly, you know, the higher chance that both of them could get injured, right? So it was just tactically not handled well at all.
And this specific de-escalation training was for the incident, which I'll refer to as the first incident with Ms. Trevino.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And so the reason we're here today is the second incident from a disciplinary standpoint with Ms. Trevino that occurred on September the 6th of 2023.
That's correct, sir. This is kind of, to me, I'll just use my term. I won't put in anyone else's mouth, but this is like textbook progressive discipline, right? You're supposed to look at it and say, okay, what's the least amount of discipline I can apply here to correct the behavior, short term and long term. There was some talk earlier about what matters. You know, how far back does it matter? But you can see in the dates here and the string that it does.
Now, this document, which is City of Braunfels Exhibit Number 1, you're the author of this document?
I'm the author of this document, yes, sir. This would be the actual notice of indefinite suspension. So it looks a lot like the notice of predisciplinary hearing, but this section is actually added after I determine, okay, this is the appropriate discipline, in my opinion. This section is actually added at that point.
And after the bullet points that are under aggravating circumstances, there's another paragraph. Could you read that into the record?
It says the above listed history of complaints and dispositions illustrate to me that you have been provided numerous opportunities, including summary level counseling, training, written reprimands, and temporary suspensions to alter the negative behaviors documented within. This constitutes a complete failure to respond to the progressive disciplinary principles practiced by both the department's first line supervisors as well as the command staff.
And that was your personal opinion?
Yes, sir.
If we move down to the next page, let's actually go to 23, where it talks about rules and regulations that were violated in the Braunfels Police Department. Much has been made, we've talked about this today, NPD policy and procedure, professional standards of conduct, restrictions on behavior, H, personal use of police power. What facts did you use to determine that those allegations for that particular policy were violated?
Basically everything from in-car video, watching the body-worn camera, reading the responses that Pat had to the questions. So basically it was a totality of everything in the investigation. Basically led to me sustaining that allegation.
Now, with regard to the fact that this last sentence says, in all other cases, officers shall summon an on-duty police personnel and supervisor in cases where there is a personal involvement that would reasonably require law enforcement intervention.
Correct.
Now, he did, when I talk about Mr. Akers, did call for a backup officer and a supervisor.
He did, yes, sir.
But what did he do after they arrived?
He went back up to the top and he used his police powers to resolve a personal grievance for something that was not in the exception section there, which is basically the exception talks about self-defense actions to prevent injury, and then when a serious offense has been committed. I think we've established fail to signal intent or allegedly failing to signal intent is not a serious offense.
How many years have you been a police officer?
34. 34. This is my 34th year.
34 years. Have you ever arrested someone for failing to use a signal to change lane?
I have not.
The real reason, and we all know it, that he arrested...
Objection, we all know it. This is a sidebar. Don't say counsel. The question, please.
Do you believe that Officer Akers arrested Miss Trevino because she flipped him the bird?
That and the fact that he had a history with her, a negative history, yes, sir. I think it was a combination of those things. That's based on not my speculation or subjectivity. It's actually based on his answers to the questions that Lieutenant Bell posed to him.
And did you, in fact, have a meeting with him prior to your making your final determination?
Yes, sir. I had a meeting with him and Mr. Dunbar both. What
was his explanation for why he arrested Trevino on September the 6th, 2023?
Well, basically, the contention was that he didn't arrest, right? I think Mr. Dunbar asked me some questions if I'd ever heard of the term unarrest, and I said yes. I first heard of that in 1987 in the police academy, and I think his contention was that there's no such thing. And I said, well, it's a thing, right? It happens in law enforcement. You arrest somebody, and they get unarrested for whatever reason, like this case right here, right? It's clear, you can see on the video, he said, you are under arrest for failing to signal lane change. She thinks she's under arrest, right? She's screaming, you're arresting me for this, you're arresting me for this, right? Just because you end up unarresting her doesn't mean that the arrest didn't happen, right? It clearly happened.
And the fact that Sergeant Scott was out there what part did that play in his eventual outcome?
Well, I think that's the whole reason that the policy states that, right? If you deviate from those accepted circumstances, you call a supervisor out there, right? And it's for the exact reason that Sergeant Scott arrived and took the actions that he took, right? As soon as he found out who that was, he was confused. He didn't connect the names, right? Trevino and Sam's. But as soon as he found out what was going on, he realized that he's violating this policy, right? Just because he has him on scene, that's the reason he's on scene, is to make sure he doesn't violate the policy, right? So Sergeant Scott did exactly what his responsibility as a sergeant is to do.
And was that within the rules and regulations of the City of Braunfels Police Department for Sergeant Scott to tell Officer Akers to turn his mic off?
Yes, sir.
And why was that?
Basically, at that point, he realized that he was now into a personnel issue. So he turned the mic off to clarify. I believe, as he testified today, I believe he was clarifying. Okay, this is what you're arresting her for. There's nothing else here. She's got a driver's license. She's got insurance. Yes. So then he knew that he was going to have to correct it. So that's when he directed him to issue a citation. And then allow her to leave. And I believe he told the other officer present to uncuff her. So he took all the correct steps to basically unarrest her.
With regard to findings 2 through 7, you also found that he had violated, Officer Akers had violated policy in his refusal to answer questions.
Yes, sir.
Why did you find that?
Well, one reason was he failed to answer a question that Lieutenant Bell posed to him, a follow-up question. The other one was what came up later in this what came up in the investigation that was absent in the in-car camera footage and Sergeant Scott's initial report is all of a sudden some other violations popped up. It wasn't just he wasn't just arresting her for failure to signal lane change. All of a sudden it was, she was driving, put him in danger, that kind of thing. I believe he brought up speeding through the school zone. It was still active. When Sergeant Scott said, tell me everything you have here, what's going on, that wasn't mentioned. And that's basically when a sergeant or gives you the directive, tell me what's going on. Why are you making this arrest? And you leave out a certain percentage of that, then that's insubordination. You have to tell your sergeant, no, this is what I believe is going on right now. There's really only, 2 things that could happen. I remember we did discuss this in the pre-disciplinary hearing as well, and there was no answer for that. It was just kind of like, yeah, well, we thought of this afterwards. Well, that's not what we do. Right? We don't. You arrest somebody, you arrest them. Your sergeant says, "What are you arresting the subject for?" You tell them all the charges they're getting arrested for. You don't think of some afterwards.
How would you characterize the way that Officer Akers pursued the Trevino vehicle?
It was reckless. That was one of the claims too, is that she had driven recklessly. In that in-car video, no matter how many times you watch it, I think he crosses the double line and passes the vehicle and then makes a right turn with his sirens on. And I know earlier the question was asked, is it common for some to do a traffic stop with sirens? No. I guarantee it's an extremely high percentage of traffic stops that aren't conducted with sirens. So yes, none of the behaviors that he described were confirmed in that video at all.
Ultimately, why did you, as Chief of Police for the City of New Braunfels, make the determination that you made to give an indefinite suspension to Officer Akers?
Well, not only based on this particular incident, right? Although as the Chief of Police, this is everything that we're not about, right? We don't use our authority to take out personal grudges, right? In any of the categories described there, but also his history, the aggravating circumstances, right? Again, I brought up the progressive discipline in the pre-disciplinary hearing, trying to get a response of like, can you explain this? why the behavior was not corrected, right? And again, as we talk about poor decisions, you know, we tried to correct that with not only written reprimands, temporary suspensions, but also offering every kind of training. Lieutenant Bell went to the training with him. So it's just like the little closing paragraph I had under aggravating circumstances. It's just failure to respond.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Cross.
How you doing, Chief?
Good, sir. How are you?
All right. So, when's the last time you went hands-on with someone?
Probably would have been around 2009.
15 years ago.
Yes, sir.
How did that end up?
In an arrest.
Okay. Any difficulty, or did they comply?
No, there was difficulty, which is why I put my hands on them.
Okay. You ever taken any investigative classes?
Yes, sir.
When was the last one?
It probably would have been around 2009 as well.
Again, 15 years ago?
Yes, sir.
So, are you familiar with which level of proof we use for your IED investigations? Is it clear, convincing, substantial, or?
I'm sorry, what burden of proof I use?
The burden of proof for IED?
Well, I can tell you what my burden of proof is. My burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt.
No, not for criminal, for IED.
For IED,
Oh, we
no.
would love that if you did that for IED, but
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
for IED investigations, what's the burden of proof that you use for New Braunfels PD?
I don't know, sir. You'd have to ask Lieutenant Bell.
Okay, is he your only IED investigator?
No, he's not now. We've since trained. We sent two others to training.
Okay, so I guess you put a lot of trust in Lieutenant Bell in his findings. Is that correct?
I put a lot of trust in his findings, but as I said before, that's not where it ends with me. You know, I don't take Lieutenant Bell's investigation and say, okay, this is it. If you've seen my pre-disciplinary hearing notice, and you've also seen my notice of indefinite suspension, so you know how much detail I put into it. So I go above and beyond just Lieutenant Bell's investigation.
So if he put non-sustained under one of the charges, would you review it to see if you have maybe a different level or different burden of proof that maybe he didn't have?
Absolutely.
Okay. We spoke about those three previous cases that you've been basically in this room the entire time. I've seen the exhibits twice now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we discussed three of the IED investigations. One of those was their Exhibit 721-011. Can you think of any reason that a police officer would not have been given that complaint? The actual complaint that came in?
Initially, yes. I think we given a complaint that's in compliance with local government code 143. The original complaint, if there's an internal affairs investigation and he wants to ask questions to see if, let's say, he wants to know if the officer's story or remembering the events coincides, is similar to, not similar to the original complaint, then yes. To get answers on the questions that just come from what he knows from the complaint that we serve him with.
You talking about Officer Akers, if he wants to see it?
I don't. If he wants to see what?
What was testified to earlier by Lieutenant Bell, your IED investigator, was, well, he never asked for the original complaint.
That could be another reason he doesn't get it. Sure.
So does a respondent police officer have to ask for the original complaint? Is that your policy?
We don't have that policy, no.
I believe Lieutenant Bell testified to the policy is we do this. We take that complaint, we create another one, which is why Chief Vargas created that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, so it's not the same complaint. It's a different complaint. What the complaint that's generated to comply with 143, I think earlier you were confusing that with an original complaint. Like Sergeant Scott writes a complaint saying, hey, this is what happened. I think this needs to get elevated to an internal affairs investigation, right? We convert that to the complaint that complies with 143, right? It's based on the information. We have to give them what policies we believe have been violated, and then we have to give them a synopsis of basically what's been reported to us.
So you're talking about a notice of investigation and not a complaint.
It's called a complaint. That's the.
But when you explain the policies that they may have, follow me here, a citizen files a complaint, online complaint, or drops off one to the front desk. You convert that to a complaint?
Yes.
That is the complaint.
If it's gonna rise to the level of an internal affairs investigation, right? Because if it's not an internal affairs investigation, it's gonna be decided with a written reprimand, summary level, right? That's not discipline. So 143 does not require a complaint there. If it's gonna be mandatory training, that's G-file, that's not discipline. So no, we do not have to generate a notice of complaint.
So are you confusing the outcome with the requirement in the beginning of providing the complaint? What I understand you saying is, well, if it doesn't end up in discipline, then we don't have to follow 614 or 143. We can do our own thing here.
No, sir, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are sometimes, you remember me talking about the information gathering phase, right? At the summary level.
Information gathering, i.e. investigating.
Right. So the sergeant can get a complaint. He can do his information gathering and say, you know what, this is unfounded. I think you saw that several times on the aggravating circumstances, right? He can also say, you know what, I think this is a written reprimand. A written reprimand is not discipline under 143. Or he or she can say, you know what, I think they just need some extra de-escalation training, right? That's not discipline under 143.
Under 143, it's not, didn't Lieutenant Bell testify this morning specifically state that reprimand and discipline, or reprimand is discipline?
No, I don't recall him saying that.
So I saw the aggravating factors. How about mitigating factors? Have there been any positive guardian entries about Akers' improvements with his constant discourtesies?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How come they didn't make it into the report?
Because I am justifying the disciplinary decision that I make.
But you put several unfounded up
Right,
there
that's
as
to
well.
show, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay, good. You put several unfounded in there as well.
Right, that's a demonstration of progressive discipline. That shows that we are objectively looking at each case individually. We're not assuming that because Pat got complained on again, that he did something wrong. We're doing our due diligence.
If you had 123 unfounded cases and only had one that was sustained, but you put all 124 in a document, what is the image that's portrayed there? Look at all these complaints to justify my suspension. Isn't that true?
No, that doesn't make sense.
What doesn't make sense is all of those unfounded there. That is not progressive discipline. That is, this complaint didn't pan out. There was nothing to
No,
it.
sir, that's textbook progressive discipline.
Which text, Chief?
I'm sorry?
Which text? Because in my 27 years working for a large municipality, the progressive piece means counseling, it didn't work, okay? Formal counseling, now a written reprimand. That's progressive.
There
It
you
gets
go.
bigger every time you violate, not every time you're complained on.
No, that's not correct. It shows
Okay.
that the process of progressive discipline is working, right? I don't just put up there complaints that are sustained, right? It shows that we do what we're supposed to do. We look at each complaint individually and we decide on the merits of that complaint. And sometimes they're unfounded.
Probably more than half of the ones that were listed.
I don't know, the list isn't here, you know.
So you were talking about CubeSmart, and you stated that Akers was dispatched to a burglary, did not have a backup. Wasn't the burglary hadn't he already handled the burglary call, and as that was completed, was pointed into CubeSmart by the owner?
No, I
Those are
don't,
aren't those two separate incidents?
no, they shouldn't be. If he got a burglary call and he pulls in there and there's a vehicle in there after it's closed with its door open, with its headlights on, I would not assume that the burglary is closed.
So you say that you got, well, I'll come back to that. The horrible tactics is what I'm stuck on here with CubeSmart. I'm sure in a perfect world, a police officer would like to dictate all of the variables that he's presented with at a call for service, or a traffic stop, or just driving down the road minding his own business and comes across somebody popping caps in the middle of the road. Is that right?
We should dictate as many variables as we can.
Okay. But sometimes we're just dealt a hand that we have to basically deal with. Is that correct?
Well, certainly, absolutely.
Okay. What I didn't see, though, is any reference to the poor tactics in the reprimand that he took for the CubeSmart case. Well, simply, it's not that you didn't use enough force, it didn't use the right force to get her under control as quickly as you should have. I believe the section was incompetence. Is that right?
I'm sorry, say it again. The what section?
Incompetence. Was it that what was the first reprimand for the case with CubeSmart from Mr. Trevino?
I don't know. I need to look at that again.
Exhibit 8.
That's right. Can I have Exhibit 8, Ms. Mears, please? New Braunfels Exhibit 8. Thank you, man. Sustained for, can we slide down? Oh, man. Keep going. I know there's an incompetence in there somewhere. Conclusion. Where's that? Oh, allegations, incompetence. Do not be incompetent, unfit, or inefficient in doing duties of your position. Did Lieutenant Bell provide anywhere in your investigation finding that it was tactics, or was that something that you came up with, something that you determined after reading his investigative summary?
Okay, can you go back up to the top?
Yes, sir.
You shot right through the investigation.
Well, I didn't shoot right through. Ms. Mears shot right through it.
Well, dang it.
I was trying to catch up myself.
I'm sorry, sir. I'll get on there about that. All right, go back up just a little bit back. All right, so it talks here about attempted to place the female under arrest. It took longer than what would be considered usual to get the female handcuffed, and force was used to obtain compliance. Then it talks about a lack of de-escalation tactics, failure to use non-force skills prior to effecting the arrest. Okay, that's part of incompetence.
Okay, can we go to that BWC, please? It's our exhibit.
Can I just want to finish.
Well,
I just want to go all the way to the bottom and make sure I answer your question
Well,
fully.
what I wanted to do, Chief, is now that we've hit that section,
Okay,
look at the video, and then we can come back to this.
Okay.
How's that?
that's good. Choose.
It's the video initial contact 3. Appellants 3. Probably 55 seconds. That's good. I think we're coming up to it. Volume should be here in a second.
Pretty good. Do you have a locker here?
Yeah.
Where at?
Down that row at the end. Why?
Well, the reason why I'm asking.
I mean, the people are here that.
No, I understand that, but they closed this place at 10.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to be here after 10, and it's 10.
I know.
But okay, just
You can come in before.
Okay, just relax. I'm just trying to explain that your thing's over here,
Yeah.
but yet you were over there, and then now.
Chief, is that one of the de-escalation tactics? Hey, just relax.
He's doing a great job so far.
Okay. So all of his tactics weren't horrible, right?
Uh,
Let's go ahead.
no, they weren't horrible. No.
Let's go ahead. Thank you.
You're over here.
Well, yeah.
Why is that?
I mean, can we just go talk to? I was just.
What are you doing over here?
When I come here, I drive around.
Okay, just relax. Stay.
I don't understand what I'm doing.
PD 2B6. No, stay away from the car.
What am I doing?
Stay away from the car.
No, what am I doing?
Give me a second, unit. I've got another issue over here.
What am I?
So he did call for a backup pretty early, didn't
No, he didn't call for backup very early. When he drove in, he drove by that exact spot I was talking about, right? There's a cutout to the left, right? He sees a car with the headlights on with the door open, right? Doesn't know what's behind it, doesn't know where the person that belongs to the car is. And instead of stopping and saying, hey, you know what? I think I need a backup unit. This is a burglary call, right? We'll get him a backup unit. As we've seen, he doesn't have any problem calling for seconds and third officers, right? So when you push a bad position, you just talked about, do we put ourselves in bad positions? Sometimes we find it there's nothing we can do about it. Here, he's already passed his opportunity to do something about it by waiting for a backup.
Let me ask you this. Was this his initial arrival at this burglary call?
I don't know. This is the only thing that's on camera.
Would you have any reason to believe that it wasn't his initial interaction?
It's not relevant to what you and I are discussing.
Well, meaning.
You're asking me to review the tactics that are on this video.
Objection, non-responsive.
Sir, that's what he asked me to do. He wanted me to review the video for tactics.
And I have particular questions. I can't let you dictate
All right.
the way I ask my questions, Steve. So I'm gonna ask a question, you would answer it. Your attorney's gonna have the chance to reform your testimony or correct anything that you state, or that I cut you off on. Perfect opportunity. So, you have any reason not to believe that they'd already met with the manager of the Q Spot regarding the burglary, and this was oh, by the way, there's some people in here, it's late, they're not supposed to be in here, we're shut down. Any reason to believe that didn't happen?
I have no reason to believe. So what you asked me before was the first burglary call was already cleared, right? So you told me that. You gave me that information, and you said, shouldn't he not assume anymore that there's a burglary? And I said, absolutely not. If you go back and you look at this scene, sir, what officer that's using good tactics is going to approach that vehicle in the manner that he approaches it with all of the disadvantages that he has? First and foremost, a backup unit.
Chief, I'm gonna stop you right there.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ask a question. What officer? I don't know. Have you taken a survey? Has this been a training video? I believe you stated earlier, well, I want a new policy. Have all the officers been shown this video? Hey, this is not what we're gonna do. We're never gonna take a vehicle head on. What happens if they're backed into a dead end? I guess we don't make contact?
Well, you're what-ifing something that wasn't there.
I'm saying, never take a vehicle. You stated it. Take a vehicle head on. Is that ever gonna happen?
Take a vehicle head on by yourself? You're making up a scenario, sir, that doesn't exist. You're showing me this scenario, and then you're saying it's
Well, he doesn't, let him answer the question.
Yeah, let him finish
Answer the
it.
question, Counselor.
No, you just get the answers you don't like. That's the difference.
Let him finish his question.
And I'd also ask that the gallery keep it down from the last, Your Honor.
You gonna rephrase the question?
Is an officer ever gonna come head onto a vehicle and that's their option? Are they?
You have to give me context.
No, that is.
No, sir, that's not the context. You're describing it. Sir, you're describing a one-dimensional event without context. You say, would an officer ever
All right,
approach
again,
a
I'm gonna
vehicle
shut-
head-on
I'm
in
gonna
this
stop
situation?
right there.
Absolutely
We
not.
cannot change the question.
Yeah, just
Again,
answer the question,
Let the
sir.
city attorney.
What he
sorry, let
asked,
the attorney
either
represent
yes or no.
the city. So what new policy was put out with regards to this interaction?
I don't think you need a new policy every time bad tactics are used. You need to do what you're trained to do.
You stated new policy right after you talked about Q-Smart tactics horrible, responded to a call, on another call, new policy on how to respond to this scenario. You stated it. I'm just asking, was there a new policy implemented based on this video, based on this interaction? Yes or no?
What are you reading? I'm
Read
looking
my
at it.
notes from your testimony.
Okay, where is that?
I just explained where it was, Chief.
You said
Your direct testimony was.
where are you
regarding
reading
to-
that from? I have a in-car, I have a body-worn camera footage.
Is this gonna be 2 days?
I hope not.
Chief, was there a new policy implemented based on this interaction?
I do not know.
You're the chief. What do you mean you don't know?
Sir, I don't know whenever there's a brand-new policy created, and I don't recall if there was a policy created for this.
Who signs off on policies that are created for New Braunfels people?
I do.
But you don't know if there was one created.
I do not know. No.
So then you got a command? Okay. Is the command staff required to come to you when they want to implement a new policy to get your sign off?
Yes, sir, I sign every completed policy, that's
You
correct.
don't know about this one?
I do not know if there was a new policy created over this, no.
So you mentioned something earlier, also in your direct, about retreat. How often do you expect your officers to retreat?
I didn't say anything about retreat. I said he should have taken the cutout of the building, stopped there, gotten out of his vehicle, so he had protection on the left, protection on the right from his vehicle, and waited for his backup. I did not say the word retreat.
No court reporter? Spears? No court reporting anywhere? Okay, will I get a copy of that? Okay, thank you. If there was a new policy regarding this, would everyone be trained on it?
Yes, sir.
Is a citation an arrest?
No, sir.
It's not an arrest with a promise to appear
That's correct.
because
It's
you
not.
sign it?
It's not an arrest.
What is it?
It's a citation. It's a promise
And you
to
are
appear.
released on what? What do you have to do when you get a citation from the officer? What does the officer do as they're explaining court date and the rest of the citation?
They ask you to sign it?
But to do what? Affirm that you will?
Yes, but you're not required to sign. There's no action to not signing a citation.
Correct. Is it not a promise to appear?
Yes, sir. It's a
Okay.
promise to appear.
But the citation is not arrest. Didn't she receive a citation? And I'll get to that in a second. I'll withdraw that. Was Ms. Trevino actively resisting in this case at Q-Smart?
Yes, sir.
Did you see any injuries? Did she sustain any injuries?
I don't know.
Did she complain about an injury?
In the video?
Here, anywhere? Have you reviewed the report?
I would have reviewed the report when I first got the internal affairs investigation, yes, sir.
Do you recall anything about that? About her injury?
No, sir.
How many officers do y'all have? Well, how many officers do y'all have on a shift at one time?
It totally depends on the shift, right? We have overlaps. When we have overlap days, there's a lot of officers on shift. Then
Do you have minimum staffing?
Yes, sir, we have minimum staffing.
What's your minimum staffing for a
6.
shift? Okay,
That's not counting supervisors.
okay. So if 5 are tied up and you're the solo officer, it's either you handle business or you hang. Is it reasonable to believe that you either handle it or you just kind of hang out and wait for another officer to become available?
What kind of call are you talking about?
Any type of call that you would, as a reasonable officer, think you would need another officer, like CubeSmart.
Like this scenario?
Yeah.
You wait for another officer.
Before you.
You don't push a bad position. No, you don't. You do not do that.
A bad position. Is he in a bad position here?
Yeah, he created a bad position for
Do we
himself.
have barricaded suspects? Is there a weapon pointed at him? What is the, I mean, maybe I've been a firefighter too long, but what's the pushing a bad position?
Because you're looking at a vehicle, the headlights are on you, right? You're at a disadvantage. You're not looking at a dark car. The driver's side door is open. You cannot see where the driver is or any other occupants. You can't tell if there's anyone behind the vehicle. The call that you're on is a burglary, and it didn't end, right? I would think, okay, maybe this is part B of the burglary. There's no way you're going to ever get me to say this is anything but bad tactics. You do wait. When you don't have a backup officer in this situation, you do wait. Because you saw what happened when he closed the position. He still didn't know who was up there, anyone else behind the car. And then another vehicle pulled up. And it wasn't a police car that pulled up. So if that's a bad guy, guess what? Now you're outnumbered because you pushed a bad position and you left cover.
So instead of having the Charger come around behind you, you've got this one uncuffed and the one that's potentially coming behind you uncuffed? So it literally is a 2-on-1.
Well, how do you cuff them? How do you
not be a bad position to be in the middle of two actors?
No, it's a bad position based on what you know right there. Why would you go cuff that person?
Wow.
So he inquired,
why
do you
would
have a
that?
locker here, right?
I mean, you heard your own sergeant say, I would cuff her. You heard your own lieutenant, I would cuff her. Now you're saying your sergeant and your lieutenant, well,
No.
they make a bad
I don't recall them saying that in this scenario. I think after you I think you posed the question, once he was already up there and she started to struggle, well, yes, you pushed the bad position, so now you have to take care of it. But the problem is when you start to use force because you believe you need to use force, you need to use it properly. You don't need to handcuff your microphone wire to her.
Okay, so that's indicative of bad tactics, having your microphone get tangled up in cuffs. Okay.
It's a result.
Is everybody,
It's a result.
Do you counsel individuals that happens to?
Do I what?
Do you counsel individuals that happens to? Looks like a little bit of a struggle there. I guess you're expecting, okay, hold on, let me make sure my mic is out of the way and make sure they can't get to my asp or my taser, and okay, I'm ready to go because all my stuff is tucked away. That's not practical, is it?
No, you're not in that position in the first place, period.
Okay.
You don't do it.
I mean, you might not be in that position from the office, but when you're in that position, it happens.
Well, I worked
Correct.
patrol for 12 years, sir.
I get it. 15 years ago. 15. Last time you went.
Exactly. So tactically, nothing has changed in 15 years. Safe is safe. Tactics are tactics.
Okay. Did your department know that Trevino was harassing Akers before the traffic stop, September traffic stop?
What do you mean by our department?
A representative of your department.
I don't know. I didn't know.
Okay. Sergeant stated that he knew, right?
I didn't know that.
My question is, the sergeant stated that he knew. Is that correct? You were
Sergeant
there for
Scott?
testimony right there.
Yes, he did.
Lieutenant over IED, he knew. What do y'all have in place when officers are treated like this? Their information put on the internet. Your own department's social media is attacked. Every post you make, an officer does something good in the community, and here's a post. Yeah, well, that officer ain't like Akers, and slamming every time you put out something positive. What do y'all have in place to address that with a citizen?
We don't have anything in place to address somebody basically exercising their First Amendment right to free speech. What do you want us to do about that? What's your expectation?
Is it your social media page?
What?
Is that your social media page? New Braunfels PD social media page?
We have a social media page, yes.
You don't have the ability to. That would be asking you for a legal conclusion. Do you ever get with city legal and say, hey, what can we do about this?
I have.
And what was city legal's response? It wasn't thick skin, was it, Chief?
No, it was nothing. If we choose to post this way and we choose to take comments, we cannot shut the comment. We cannot delete comments unless it meets a very strict criteria.
Like giving out officers' personal information, their home address, things like that? Where he lives, what is stop?
Are
Are you saying, do we post that on our social media?
Oh, if they begin posting it on your social media, hey, this officer is 256, he lives over on Gaines, and his shop number is 2204, that information, can't delete it?
No, we can't. They usually know that there's a police officer living there because there's a police car parked in front of the house. I would say that's a pretty good guess that, hey, there's a cop that lives there.
The neighbors on the street, right, but
Yeah.
for the individuals in Florida, Wisconsin, and I believe Nevada that call in? Or...
Well, it doesn't matter how you get the information, sir. It's their freedom to post that information. It's the First Amendment.
So the next officer that comes to you saying, I'm having this issue, is that going to be the response? Sorry, we can't do anything about it.
Having what issue?
This issue, the issue you've been sitting here for all day, the social media posts, the emails, threatening docs, bullets, pictures of your wife online. That's
Right.
what we're going to tell the officer. Sorry, we can't do anything about it.
About that and nothing else? No, it's social media. You can post things on social media. It's your First
And we're talking
Amendment.
about, that's a bad position.
It's your First Amendment right, sir.
You saw the traffic stop? I believe you've seen it 3 or 4 times today. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You have a lawful reason to conduct a traffic stop on Mr. Trevino?
He claimed that he did.
Did you see her silver vehicle, silver and blue, in exhibit number, in the initial traffic stop video? I believe it was Officer Akers, City of New Braunfels Exhibit 4, or my Exhibit 22.
Several times. Yes, sir.
Sorry about, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I said several times.
No, I was telling Ms. Mears, go ahead.
All right.
Oh, I was gonna stop as soon as that. Forward about 20 forward.
Step.
20. 20 forward from there, which is
Step.
30 maybe.
Steppy step.
So you have the same video that that she felt the signal, is that correct?
That's what he said in his testimony. I can't see the back of the vehicle. I have no idea whether it's signaled to lane change or not. Yeah, that's where the blinker is in the back.
Lieutenant Bell's testimony that he reviewed the BWC and the vehicle was back a ways. We can recall him if we need to, Chief. Was back a ways when she failed to signal, and then she was here.
No. What I'm saying is you cannot determine, I cannot determine she did not fail to signal or turn unless I can see the back of her vehicle. Is it possible that that front left signal light is out? Is it possible?
What if the rear's out?
Is it possible? That's what I'm saying.
For equipment violation?
No, if I can't see the rear of the vehicle.
You are saying right now that he didn't have probable cause because you couldn't see the back blinker. By then, she was already in the left lane, so what's the point?
That's exactly right. No, you're asking me, do you see that she failed to signal the lane change? I said, no, I can't see the back of the vehicle. You're asking me. He made the traffic stop, not me.
He did, and your ID investigator stated that, yes, had about reason for a stop because of failed signal lane change.
Sir, I can't speak to his testimony. You asked me a question, did I see the vehicle fail to signal a lane change? And I said, I need to see the rear of the vehicle to make that determination.
I'm sorry, but Chief, that defies logic so they jump over and you never see the back end, you got no PC for a stop?
if you choose to make that stop, part of you talked earlier about the 7-step violator contact, okay? Part of that is saying, hey, ma'am, I stopped you for failing to change the lane. Is your back light working? Because I didn't see your front light signaling that change, right? It's like when they say, Mr. Dunbar, I stopped you for speeding. Is there a reason for your speed today? That's part of the 7-step violator contact. But when you ask me, watching this video, do you see that she didn't signal the lane change? I don't see that because I can't see the back of the car, sir. Maybe she did and the front light's out. If you keep playing the video,
we're going to be here all day if you take over the testimony. I want to get you to answer the question that I asked. Let's go to City of New Braunfels Exhibit 2. Page 13 at the bottom. The conclusion, Lieutenant Bell's conclusion, not just this testimony, the conclusion. She made an obscene hand gesture and then failed. We already determined that he's got those backwards. But he failed to signal a lane change. He gave this to you, and you created a pre-disciplinary hearing. Did you miss this?
No, sir, I didn't miss it.
Okay,
It says,
so she did fail to signal a lane change.
no,
She didn't fail to signal a lane change.
that's not what this says. It's what Officer Akers said happened.
Conclusion.
That's what it says. For what Officer Akers said happened.
Is this conclusion on what he found, or is it a conclusion on what was said?
What was
Because
said.
this conclusion states that Officer Akers is, by his action, biased. Akers knows he's being baited, still makes the stop. That sounds like a conclusion, like it's his determination. Again, we can recall Lieutenant Bell and ask him, did he make a valid traffic stop? He's going to tell you yes. But now you're saying if you can't see the back, then there's no PC. Okay. Let's move on. If you were to see the back of the car while she was still changing lanes from right to left, which wouldn't make sense, she wouldn't need to signal then. But if you could see the back, she didn't have a signal on, then it's a lawful stop, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and failure to signal lane change is arrestable according to the Code of Criminal Procedure?
Yes, sir.
Okay. State allows you to, right?
Yes, sir.
Even without any other actions of the driver, they can be arrested.
That's correct.
Yeah. Like if they refuse to get out of the car when asked. Step out of the car, which they're allowed to do, Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, if they're given,
Pennsylvania.
if they're given the ability to do it, and they don't, yes.
She had the ability to do it. We saw her step out.
No,
right?
she was actually doing it.
Okay. She what?
She was getting out of the vehicle.
After the first command or after the second?
After the second, the first and second commands came in rapid succession, right? You have to let them get out of the vehicle. It's not, as you said before, there's no time frame in getting out of the vehicle. It doesn't say you have to be out in 3 seconds. So that's saying that she was refusing to get out of the vehicle is not correct.
I'm gonna hold you right there again, Mr. Girio can. Let's go with Exhibit 22 again, please, Ms. Mears. It's all right. Exhibit 22. We're going to go to about a minute and 20. Right there. Well, let's go to one. That's fine.
We're going to stop on the 500 block of Rusk Avenue.
PD 256 traffic.
256.
Boyd Charles Paul 5990. Boyd Charles Paul 5990. Be at Gardenia in South Walnut. Can I get a second?
Great. Can I get a backup unit for 256 at Gardenia at South Walnut?
217, General.
35 256. If it's possible, could you make my location? PD 2V6, put me up to 1049 of Gardenia.
We're at 1049 Gardenia.
253, on duty stop.
That's Chris. I'm showing insurance is confirmed and that the registration is valid, no wants.
Copy.
256, I'm showing that your insurance is confirmed and showing that the registration is valid, no wants.
That's clear.
$30,000 Virginia.
That's good.
Detail.
Right.
So this is that female, Trevino. She flicks me off as I'm going back to the back of my patrol car, tells the single left hand to go into the left lane. She flicks me off, so I just wanted a second when I made contact with her.
All right, let's stop right there. Chief, did you hear him ask for a supervisor?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hear him ask for a second cover? Backup
Second,
officer
first,
on duty
supervisor,
personnel?
second, yes, sir.
Okay. Did you hear him state that she failed to signal going into the left lane?
After he said she flicked me off, yes,
Yes or no, Chief?
I did. I
Okay.
heard.
So would it make sense if she's already in the left lane to continue her signal? Up past the patrol car, she's already in the left lane,
No,
block signal. Okay. So if you saw it off, you really couldn't stop now because it wasn't indicated to change lane. She already changed it, correct?
no.
She had already changed
No,
the
first
left
of
lane.
all, he says,
Are there only two
she-
lanes going in that
are
direction?
you gonna let me answer the question?
No, sir. Are there only two lanes going in that direction?
Erner,
Yeah,
he needs to answer the question.
Are there
let him
only,
answer the question.
that is the question.
No,
Are there
no,
only-
you asked me a question, you didn't allow me to answer.
I'm sorry, Chief, don't admonish me, okay? That's for the court only.
Yeah. You want to answer that question?
Yes, sir, I'm trying to answer. Are you talking, which question are we talking about now? There's
The
two
question,
on
how many lanes?
the, two.
Okay. The right lane and the left lane. Two officers and a subject that had been stopped are in the right lane. She passes, she's in the left lane. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What's the need to signal she's already in the left lane to go left?
I don't understand the question. What's the need to signal if she's already in the left lane?
Is there a need to signal when changing to the left lane if you're already in the left lane? She's there.
I don't understand the point of your question. When she's up next to him and you can see her extending the middle finger at him,
Flipping them off.
he says, I saw her flip me off and then I saw that she didn't change lanes, that she didn't signal a change. Okay?
So you mischaracterized the testimony or the statement. It said, and then I saw, he said, and, not and then. And then would insinuate some sort of order. Would it not?
Objection, that's a compound question and doesn't make sense.
Yeah, rephrase it.
Would using and then infer chronology?
Well, I think he's described it differently, just like in his answers to the questions, he described it differently.
My question is, and then, does that infer chronology? Doesn't it? Okay.
Yes, sir, I'd
Go
say
ahead.
it does. You're correct.
Go ahead, Mr. Pierce. Thank you.
You have a lot more questions regarding this.
How's it going? Officer Eggers, New Braunfels Police Department. Okay,
I know who you are.
that's fine. Well, the reason why you being...
Over for flipping you off.
No, ma'am, the reason why...
You are retaliating against me. You turned your sirens on and everything, ran over here like a crazy person.
Okay, well, ma'am, the reason why you're being contacted is you failed to signal lane change when you flicked me off.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead and step out of the car. step out of the car. I have three officers here.
He's hurt me before. Please don't let him.
Yeah, would you mind, Henderson, go ahead and detain her in cuffs?
Because he's been illegal to me.
When told to step out of the car, did she continue her focus on the traffic stop officer or on the officer who had no verbal interaction with her at any time so far through a passenger window?
She was talking to Sergeant Scott.
Was he allowed to get into a seven-step process with this individual?
He was not trying to de-escalate at all.
So who controlled the escalation?
She did.
So as far as your policy, personal use of police power, it says don't do it, but if you do, call the supervisor and on-duty personnel. Why doesn't that go into the responsibilities of the sergeant if this is a department-wide policy?
That's not what it says.
Ms. Mears, can we go to, and we'll come back to that video. Can we go to New Braunfels Exhibit 1? I believe page 20-ish.
23.
There's one on 20 also. It's actually located in, there's charges located on on 5 different pages. So first set of 5 charges and then 7 and 7. That confused me. Yes, sir. Chief, maybe I paraphrased it, but what did I miss out on? Don't do it in these 3 circumstances. In all of the cases, summon on-duty personnel and a supervisor. Then what? What happens then?
So, what you're talking about is it says officers shall not use their police powers to resolve personal grievances, and then it basically EGs, those involving officer, family members, relatives, or friends, except under the following circumstances: use of self-defense, actions to prevent injury to another person, or when a serious offense has been committed that would justify an arrest.
Which doesn't apply here, correct?
Those do not apply here. If action is taken under these circumstances, the officer will immediately report his actions on this shoot. In all of the cases, officers shall summon on-duty police personnel and a supervisor in cases where there is a personal involvement that would be reasonably require law enforcement intervention.
Okay. Supervisor's there, on-duty personnel there. Now what?
You make sure that he does not use his police powers to resolve a personal grievance. That's what the on-duty supervisor that is summoned there is to do and did.
Did that happen here? I mean, kind of after the fact. It's like once the cut's made, can't undo it. You can't unfire that bullet, right?
As soon as the sergeant found out what the circumstances and that it qualified for this policy, he took action. He testified to that.
Yeah, I understand he testified to it. You know, it has been greater than, it's been almost a year. But there was some, you heard his testimony, you were sitting right there. Well, I didn't know, and I get the CYA thing, but the reason the supervisor is there is say, hold on a dang second, you're about to jam us up. So again, what happens here? What happens next? Should there be a next paragraph like, hey, supervisor, if any inkling at all, man, put a hold on everything. And it just stops.
Apparently not, because he did exactly what he's supposed to do. So Sergeant Scott didn't need another line, another paragraph. He did exactly what the policy tells him to do. Once he arrives, you do not let that happen.
When you're talking about policy enforcement, like we are right now, talking about plain meaning rules, something like if you do it anyway, or if this happens, or if you blow this off, then we're going to do this. The 2 boxes are checked: supervisor and on-duty personnel. I guess what I'm saying is we believe there should be something else there. You as a department head should think, okay, to close this loophole, we're going to amend this policy. You can amend the policy, it's your department. We're going to amend this policy to where everybody's responsible, or if somebody's personally involved, you will not make contact, you will not push a bad position, make contact with the individual until everything is clear. I mean, I'm sure you saw the same video. The sergeant's like, okay, hold on, he's trying to wrap his head around everything, and then.
Objection to this narrative is, there's no question.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I believe the question was, don't you think there's something missing?
No, sir. I don't think there is, and Sergeant Scott obviously didn't either.
Even if you don't think so now, you think there's an amendment of this policy coming? Something added?
No.
What do you think about officers enforcing minor traffic infractions?
Enforcing minor we do it all the time.
You heard her say in that video, don't let him hurt me. He's hurt me before.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You seen any evidence? You've heard the testimony as the department head sitting in here. You heard the testimony from the sergeant and your IED investigator that, yeah, that was an old injury. Would you agree with that?
That it was a what?
An old injury? That she was not injured in either dealing with Officer Akers?
I have no idea. I know she complained of the use of force in the CubeSmart thing.
Yeah, about to lose her leg.
But I have no knowledge of injuries that were
It's like something like, I'm
that.
about to lose my leg. So one of the social media comments, one of her First Amendment right
I don't know.
comments. Sorry, I got several pages. I'm trying to cut out the fluff, the stuff that you've already addressed. Do you have, would it be reasonable, you've seen the map of where they live, you've seen her statements about how close she lives, she knows where Pat lives, and the multiple, probably a dozen of them, the pictures of her, actually more than a dozen, like 10 complaints, and then the several photos of her driving by the house. You think, did you, just from the information given earlier, do you think that's reasonable for a person to be driving by that much?
I'm sorry, you said the 10 complaints.
Well, in that one report, can we bring that up? It's my Exhibit 1, the report from CubeSmart. I'm sorry, the criminal complaint, which is, hold on, that was 39 instead. I'm sorry, Ms. Mears, 39A. So would you agree that first you see the address, 3030 West San Antonio?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it unusual for a police officer to give his address as being the police station to protect private information? Is that unusual?
I have no idea.
Okay. Victim at the bottom, involvements. Victim, Patrick Akers. Suspect, Brittany Lee Sams. Do you see that on 1226?
I do.
Okay. Ms. Mears, can you slide down to the bottom with all of the incident numbers? I think it's the last page. Yes, ma'am, right there. So do you see the 10 case numbers there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, plus the one that this is actually on. So we're looking at almost a dozen reports of harassments, drive-by, stalking, if you will. And you saw all of the photos, several dozen photos, different times of day and night. Is it reasonable that that could have an effect on an officer?
I have no idea.
Yes, okay, then let's put this and have you be Pat. Married, have small kids at the house.
I'll tell you what, sir, let's take a break right now, okay? And I'd like to take a 10-minute break. Let's go off the record. Gentlemen, I was talking to Becca, and she's telling me that the commissioners are coming in at 4:30. They're gonna use this room. So, you know, we have it until 4:15, so it's either. Pardon me? Pardon me? You breeze through? Well, let me ask you this, you know, if he finishes, do you have any more witnesses?
No.
You don't have any more? How about you? I like his. You got to meet Bourbon's on the city so far. They've shown that I'm not related to the starters and the other one. Okay, then we can finish it in the 15 minutes.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then I'll tell you what. If we go ahead and finish it in 15 minutes, you know, I want you to do a brief. I'm not going to give you a directed verdict. Okay? So, give you a brief. Got 30 days to do it.
Okay.
30 days from today, and then I'll take my 60 days to issue a decision. Okay?
So our briefs are due the same day? He's not gonna file one, I can review it, and I'll say, no, that's not what happened.
No, what you do is you do the brief, you email it to me, okay? And you email it to each other, okay? If you want to give a responding brief after that, a responding answer to the brief, then you can do that too. I'll give you an additional 10 days for that, you know? Right, a reply brief, there you go, a reply brief, okay? Okay. We're not gonna change, it looks like we're gonna wrap it up here, okay? Okay. Yeah, they're coming in at 4:30, so we gotta be out of here at 4:15, so. Hey, I needed a break. Otherwise, I was gonna have an accident.
I'm ready.
Okay. You ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Becca, you ready? She's been great. Okay, back on the record. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Chief, you heard testimony earlier that Lieutenant Bell told Akers to file off-duty. You recall that?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with that, to file off-duty, file the complaint off-duty?
I understood his reasoning. I don't think it's a necessity. You know, I think his reasoning is he was trying to not only look out for the process, right? He didn't want, at some point, if there is a criminal prosecution, he didn't want anything to muddy the waters, right? He wanted to keep it kind of separate, not show any favoritism.
Okay.
I would have been fine if he did it on duty.
All right, so earlier we spoke, Lieutenant Bell and I don't know, I think we went around and around for about 10 minutes on one question. Bell gave a directive, it was his admonishment in the notice of investigation, that Akers must truthfully answer all questions related to his official duties and related to this investigation. I'm going to ask you like I asked Lieutenant Bell. How is the reason that he has not filed a criminal complaint yet part of his job duties?
Well, he's still under investigation, right? That wasn't the conclusion. Those questions aren't the conclusion of the investigation. So how he answered that, in Lieutenant Bell's mind, I understand. He's saying how he answers this is something develops in the investigation, or the chief wants to ask him a question to follow up on why he hadn't filed it, then yes, it needs to be answered, which is a complete, because as you know, during the investigation is when he first filed the report, right? Criminal report.
4 days after Lieutenant Bell sent you, you had notice on, I believe, the 22nd, we saw on the exhibit, New Braunfels Exhibit 2, that it was submitted December 22nd. 4 days later is when the criminal complaint was filed.
Exactly.
So my question is, and we're getting all that, well, you needed to answer about the investigation. My specific question is this: how is the reason why he hasn't filed related to his official duties as a New Braunfels police officer?
Because the policy violation was that he took action, police action against Ms. Trevino, right? He used his authority for personal reasons.
That's
So,
again, it's not my question. The reason why he didn't file, you're saying that's part of his official job duties?
yes, absolutely. It's part of the
I still haven't heard.
it's part of the investigation.
Okay. It says part of the investigation and part of your job duties. It says, and there's two separate things. You and Lieutenant Bell have focused on one part, the internal investigation part. I can't get a straight answer on why it's part of his official duties. Does anybody, I'd just like an explanation how it's part of his official duties. To tell you why he hasn't filed something off duty that does not affect his job performance.
But he doesn't know that at the point. It may. The investigation doesn't end with that question, right?
He doesn't know. He doesn't know what his job duties are?
Your Honor, he should be allowed to answer the question.
Yeah, let him finish.
You gave me 15 minutes.
I gave you 15
And I'm
minutes.
cutting to the chase.
Okay.
And I'm getting the tap dance that I got from Lieutenant Bell, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Tell me how it's part of his job duties. Just
It's my
I
job.
didn't even say, okay, because the chief said so. I didn't even take that answer, but surely somebody in this room knows how it's part of his job duties.
As long as he's a police officer with the New Braunfels Police Department, it's his duty to answer the question that's asked in an administrative investigation. Because at some point, I'm going to review those answers to those questions. And I may have a follow-up question because something's happened between now and then, like he did file charges. And I believe that you and I talked at the pre-disciplinary hearing, and I asked you, what happened to make him file, because we were going round and round about this. I said, what finally happened that didn't exist then to make him file charges?
You got the final investigative report. That's what happened. That's what we're waiting on. So the investigation, like Lieutenant Bell said, would not be affected. Turn it into you, and then there's no take back. All right, let me change that since he did file a complaint. But again, we keep saying because it's dealing with an investigation, I guess we'll never get an answer. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Specifically, directly, and narrowly, we haven't been able to even touch that. Those 6 charges, 2 through 7, those were because he would not provide the explanation on why he didn't file?
And he did not answer Sergeant Scott's original question.
Was that in the synopsis anywhere? That sounds like it came in from left field just now because it's nowhere in his investigative report. So Sergeant Scott was conducting an investigation?
No, the question, he was asked the question, let me see which question it was. Did you articulate the reasons you elected to arrest Brittany Trevino Sam to Sergeant Scott? It's question number 1. When he asked you why she was being arrested, if yes, what was the reason or reasons? If you did not fully articulate.
Chief, you stated that related to this investigation, isn't it true that when Sergeant Scott asked him, there was no investigation? That was at the scene. Sergeant Scott has not even got back to headquarters to file anything. It was not an investigation. So
it doesn't matter if it's an investigation. It's a supervisor saying, tell me what. It's a supervisor that he called to the scene asking you, what are all the charges, right? What are all the violations? What are all the charges? He even says, does she have a driver's license? Does she have insurance? He says, no, it's failed to change lane. That's it.
Chief, tell me this. At what point was the investigation initiated into this traffic stop?
On a summary level? As soon as Sergeant Scott got there. As soon as Sergeant Scott got there.
All right, you stated earlier that looking into something does not necessarily mean an investigation. Summary level, there is no investigation. They can issue a reprimand without it because it's not disciplined in accordance with 143. Now you're saying, well, this is an investigation. So you had to answer Sergeant Scott. Again, out of left field, but that's okay, Chief. I understand we're trying to bolster this up. So before our pre-disciplinary hearing, that criminal complaint was filed, is that true? For the disciplinary hearing on January 17th, the offense report was filed December 26th?
I'll trust you on the dates. I don't have anything in front of me that shows me that.
So that part of the pre-disciplinary letter was incorrect, is it not?
Which part?
The part that says, as of this time, no complaint of Spillman. But that wasn't correct, was it?
Which part are you referring to? Like I said, I don't have that in front of me.
Pre-disciplinary letter,
Right?
where Lieutenant says, hey, at this time,
Do you have that to show me? It might save a little bit of the time you're trying to save here.
just tell me this. On the date of the pre-disciplinary hearing, had the criminal complaint been filed?
I believe it had.
Okay. Would the fact that filing a criminal complaint have diminished some of this discipline? Would it change the outcome? Like, okay, we're not going to give you an indefinite suspension. We're going to give you 2 days because you filed a criminal complaint.
No, it would have.
Okay. So Lieutenant Bell could corroborate, if he would have filed it, it could corroborate Officer Akers' statements and could further be used to clear him. So basically what you're saying is, if an officer gets jammed up with IED, if they go file a complaint on a citizen, that could help them get out of it. Isn't that a bad policy to have? That's a bad policy, right, Chief? Sounds like what the inference is. File a complaint, well, maybe we can help.
Your fictitious scenario is I can't answer that. It's not even real. That's not what our policy is.
When you have time this evening, read what he stated on page 13, Lieutenant Bell. Could further be used to clear him on the internal investigation. Sounds like he's let outside factors influence him. That's not proper, is it? So if he decides to answer a question that's not specifically, directly, and narrowly related to his job duties, it's okay, I'm going to tell you why. It's because we got the emails. There seems to be a personal something, perhaps, between you and the complainant, and we choose not to fire a shot that might shoot ourselves in the foot. Then he's facing one charge. Could you speculate as the decision maker what the discipline would have been then?
I don't even understand your question.
Take out charges 2 through 7. What would discipline have been on a findings of sustained for the first charge?
It would not have changed my findings, my disciplinary findings.
Chief, one last question. So we met before, right, at the pre-disciplinary hearing? Actually, twice.
Twice, yes, sir.
So several days later in February, you had lunch with Chiefs Weibert and Vargas. Is that correct?
I have no idea.
You don't recall having lunch with them?
I've had lunch with them several times.
Okay. February, right after Akers was fired?
I don't recall that.
Okay.
I'm not saying it wasn't. I just don't recall the date.
Didn't you tell Weibert and Vargas that, if he just fallen on the sword, I wouldn't have fired him, but I didn't like his attorney?
No,
Does
sir.
that sound familiar?
No, sir.
And you're under oath, Chief.
It absolutely is not true.
Okay, pass the witness.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Nothing further? I just have one question. The notice of indefinite suspension, what date was that issued? 24th. The 24th of what? Pardon me?
December.
January 24th?
January.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Yes, it's Exhibit 1, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, I got it. Thank you. That's the only question I have. Okay. Well then, okay. Do you have any witnesses anymore?
Not any more witnesses.
No rebuttal witnesses or anything? How about yourself?
No, the appellant calls no witnesses. We rest.
Okay, you rest. Okay.
Until brief.
Okay, briefs are due 30 days from today. If, and you can also send a reply brief 10 days after receipt of the initial post-hearing brief. If the parties wish to extend those time periods, you know, because I know, you know, you get into situations where you have to extend, time limits, you know, talk among yourselves, you know, come to an agreement.
I gotta talk to him?
Yes, you gotta talk to him. Come to an agreement and, let me know, okay? And,
attorney on another case, it's not the last time I'll say it.
okay, okay. Anyway, that's it on this case.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Thank you, sir. Very nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you, Judge.
Nice meeting you. We'll see- and-
I'm glad we arranged to have the Commissioners Court come at this time.
Oh, really? And I guess I have you in 2 more weeks? do I?
Yes, 20th, yeah.
On the 20th, yeah. Okay. Hey, very nice, very nice. Take care.
Yeah, you already had yours, yeah.
Have you all been watching the Olympics?
Yes.
Boy, I've been glued to that.
Yeah,
Entertaining. It's been.
That could have been an Olympic